The EU is a joint group of member states that collectively have close to 447 million people. The EU is ranked as the third largest economy in the world after China and the United States of America. It is home to the world's second most widely held reserve currency after the US dollar, with approximately equal holdings of all the foreign currency reserves combined. With all these great qualities, the EU is currently facing major turmoil that will soon threaten its unity and future economic success. In recent years, the EU has seen most of its members struggle to come up, and even others facing much bigger problems in terms of economy and peace. Wait, we have more for you. Just make sure that you stick to this video till the end. The EU sits on the world with a count of 20 member countries that use the euro. The euro has become so popular that it is not only a currency for the EU nations alone, but also a currency for some other countries from all over the world as well. The region has long boasted of its huge economic success and prowess, but unexpectedly, this has not been their usual national anthem, as things have begun to get on heat. It is very evident that the EU has begun to see challenges, and if measures are not set up, we will soon witness this mega economy fall to its knees. First of all, we have to accept the fact that the formation of the EU in 1993 was the beginning of all these challenges. The first mistake the EU made was to create a political union that, in our case, we can call misguided. All countries of Europe usually have their separate histories and cultures, and despite this, many people did not want to exchange their national identities for a European one. You can imagine, your community is used to this one culture, and then after another community takeover or amalgamation, they want you to adapt to the new way. Will you take it lightly and accept that way quickly? Of course, you have the answer. That is the same thing that some of the European countries within the EU disagree with. Another challenge this union is facing is slow economic growth for some states. The global pandemic broke a lot of production lines as governments acted to slow down the spread of the virus by shutting down factories and controlling shipments. It also slowed down workers crossing borders, and this made working from home a common trend. And not only that, but the war in Ukraine was also like another nail in its coffin, as it further accelerated the down movement in its growth. The war in Ukraine has pushed the idea that the country should maintain its self-sufficiency, so they're not helpless when external shocks stopped the delicate supply lines that they were so dependent on. Also, a lack of democracy is another challenge in the European Union and is also one of the biggest challenges facing the Union. Most of the big changes are usually decided by national governments and not by the European Parliament, or directly by the people of the EU. In many countries, all the main political parties historically are pro-EU, so there is a sense that Europe will do whatever it wants. And this means that if the EU has much more control over its member states, it would just become a country, like the proposed United States of Europe, and a lot of members wouldn't be happy with that, and they would just leave. Again, just to reiterate something that we had covered in our former video about brain drain, please go and check it if you haven't already watched it. In Europe, brain drain has become much more of a problem because, unlike someone moving from India to the United States, someone moving from Bulgaria to Ireland wouldn't need to apply for a visa and go through the approval process, but they could just move and find a job. The benefits of a shared currency are another double-edged sword. On one hand, they make trading commerce between member states much easier. They also give those states access to a world reserve, which attracts much more confidence internationally than any other of their currencies would individually. This means all of the other countries in the EU would be forced to therefore conduct their international trade and borrowing in an alternative reserve currency, which can be expensive, complicated, and very risky. If countries can't get access to foreign currencies that they trade in, they can be put in a position where they can no longer pay for vital imports or make repayments on their loans. These desperate situations are playing out right now in countries like Sri Lanka and Pakistan. You can also go and check on our video about Pakistan, which gives full details about its collapsing economy. Still on the same, sharing access to the world's second most widely traded and widely held reserve currency means that the countries in the EU will never find themselves in that sort of position, even if they do have debt problems. So it sounds like the benefits of a shared currency are pretty compelling. but the drawbacks are also quite serious, especially for countries that are more responsible with their debt burdens. Just to give you a few insights, when Greece got into trouble in the early 2010s, it brought the Eurozone down with it. This meant that other countries in the EU certainly were not free of blame, but most of them could have avoided the protracted economic stagnation that came with having to make monetary decisions to look after the weakest links. As evident with Pakistan and Sri Lanka, most likely this scenario might repeat itself, and hence economic collapse. Also, the economic and social pressures created by mass immigration, especially with countries like Germany accepting thousands of refugees from North Africa and the Middle East, are bound to result in problems in the short, medium, and long term. In brief, we can say that immigration on such a grand scale is at best a jump into the dark, and more of a disease to the performance of the EU in the coming future. Another challenge is the expansion of the EU into Eastern Europe. This is one big mistake that the EU committed. As well as having very different economies, their values are different. Governments in former communist countries tend to be more authoritarian. There is also cosmopolitan and multiculturalism in their mentality than Western Europe. So expanding into Eastern Europe has resulted in increased tensions with Russia, which is a fatal problem to the peace of the states. Britain's decision to leave the EU is also a severe blow to the organisation on many levels. Psychologically, it's a blow because it was never envisaged that countries would want to leave. Economically, it hurts because Britain has a big economy and London is a major international centre of trade. Politically, it encourages Eurosceptical leaders and parties in other EU countries to be more assertive. The EU proponents argue that being a member of the EU gives countries a much stronger negotiating platform when it comes to trade deals. But the truth is that EU negotiations tend to be cumbersome and time-consuming. We think that the only resolution here is that the bilateral agreements between countries can be made much quicker and be catered more closely to the needs of the individual countries rather than the one-size-fits-all approach. Trade deals also often result in cheaper goods and labor coming in and undermining the interests of European workers and companies. So what happens if the EU collapses? Now this is a question you might be having in mind, but the only answer here is that nobody knows, and depending on what the collapse looks like, in the next decade a slow and steady movement of countries from the Union would hurt economic growth. The estimates for economic CRST of Brexit range from around 2.5% to 8% of the UK's GDP, but it had some advantages that other countries would not, so it never adopted the euro and it kept its currency, the pound, which is also a well-recognised and at least up until recently tightly respected global currency. Other countries would need to create a new currency from scratch, which would make even the most basic functions impossible. Until that system is set up, conservatively it would put economic losses at the higher end of the estimates, only scaled up to all of Europe. In summary, it would cause a severe, continent-wide recession that would make the Eurozone crisis look insignificant in comparison. To your side, what do you think needs to be done to mitigate these challenges that the EU is facing? We would be more than happy to see your great thoughts in the comment section. Just make sure you don't forget to let us know your side of reasoning about this calamity that is set to consume the European Union. Meanwhile, this brings us to the end of our video today, and we hope you guys found this video interesting and especially informative. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to send us those thumbs up. Also, as a daily reminder, if you still haven't subscribed, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel for more of our content.